Okay, I got the go-ahead from Erica, so I'm just gonna, go for it. Welcome to Modern Front-End, web development. Today, I'm just gonna run through a few things for you guys. I know that everyone has probably different experiences with like building websites and everything, so this is gonna be more like an intro-level course. But feel free to ask me any questions. Okay. So my name is Nok. I am a senior software engineer for a company called Workday. You may have heard of it or you may not. It runs a lot of the HR software for like larger Fortune 500 companies like Target, Walmart, Netflix. And I've been in this industry for about 15 or so years. I focus primarily on front-end web development. And I built my first website when I was probably like 15 or 16. And when I first built it back in the 90s, it was horrible and ugly. But that's basically all the websites looks like in the 1990s. For example, let's go back to the past a little bit. This is what some of the major websites looked like back in the 90s. And this is one of the earliest versions of Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple. Okay. Now, for most of you that don't know, the internet's been around, for a while. And for the most part, it's backwards compatible, okay? And it runs on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's why websites are 30, something years old, still works, up until today, for better or for worse. So, let's take a look at these, 3 websites, for example, that are currently still running. The first one is Berkshire Hathaway. Nothing fancy, straight out of the 90s, okay? Still going strong. This website may not look like much, but it is owned by billionaire Warren Buffett. And a lot of people, go into it for information. It doesn't have a lot of fancy feature or frills, but it does load fast. And it gets you exactly what you're kind of looking for, okay? So this is very reminiscent of early 90s, website, not a lot of images, just plain text. Moving forward a little bit to the mid 90s, and you have something like Space Jam. Not the Space Jam that just came out, but the old Space Jam with Michael Jordan. And this website still works and still exists today. And when it first came out, this is what it looked like. Pretty ugly, but barely legible, red text on black backgrounds, but that was what we had. Up until flash forward to the late 90s or so, and we got the adoption of Adobe Flash. And Adobe Flash has been deprecated, it doesn't work anymore, but we still have historical archive for what it used to be. So I'm going to play this short little video clip to show you what would happen if you loaded this website back in the late 90s. So you would see all this, you would come in, there's a lot of graphics, a lot of animation. It looked to be a very creative art piece, not exactly like a website that you see today. Okay. I'm going to stop it, right there. The other nice thing about Flash was that we used to play a lot of games and stuff like that on Flash, and that has now also gone away. Okay. I'm going to close that real quick and go back. Okay. Yep. Now, let's flash forward a little bit, right? And let's talk about modern day website buildings. I asked the question how many of you try to build websites, and it turns out a few people have, and you probably have done it with website builders. And these on the left hand side, you'll see that you got Wix, Squarespace, Weebly, Shopify, Google Sites, WordPress. These are some of the more generic do-it-yourself website builders, right? The pros are that it's quick and easy to get started with building a website. It's very cost effective. You basically choose a template and you can kind of configure it. You don't really need to know a lot of like, hands-on coding knowledge or have computer science with your background, right? And you can get started. The cons is that you have limited ability to customize your website beyond the template settings. If you get started with a website like this, you could get a pretty good website going, but then if you needed to add some sort of customization or do like, things that is beyond the scope of the template, you often find that you probably can't do it, or if you can do it, it's pretty painful. You're more likely to be working around the template than working with the template to, get it started. Okay. Oops. Now, for this particular presentation, I'm going to be focusing on WordPress. Okay, so what is WordPress? WordPress was originally released back in May of 2003 primarily as a blogging platform. It's for the technological stuff. It's written in PHP, which is a pretty popular language back in the 90s. It's paired with a MySQL database, which is still very relevant today, or MariaDB. In this case, they're pretty much synonymous. And it's very famous for its quick, 5-minute install, numerous plugins and themes. And as of October 2021, it is used by almost 43% of the top 10 million websites in the US. Oh, wait, no, in the world, sorry. Okay, so that's a little bit of background on WordPress. Now, which site uses WordPress? Okay, these are some of the sites. I'm going to load it up for you guys real quick. So this is the Walt Disney Company, website. This is what it looks like. This is TechCrunch, a news site devoted to technology news. This is another news site from Microsoft, also built on WordPress. Entertainment by Katy Perry, also built on WordPress. The New York Times Company, also built on WordPress. And last but not least, Variety Magazine website, also built on WordPress. Now, as you can see, these sites don't have a lot of visual stuff in common. They have different layouts. For example, Katy Perry looks very different from Variety, looks very different from New York Times. So, but the trick to knowing that they're built on WordPress is basically you can inspect the source. Oops. And if you see anything that says WP content or WP include or just WP in general, it's pretty much going to be a WordPress website. And there's a reason why, even though it's running on pretty much very old technology, these sites are still so popular. And the reason, they're so popular, right? It's because it's familiar to people. It's pretty much if you use Facebook or Instagram or any kind of form-based, website, you don't really need to know code. You can just go in there and you can just edit, the post or the page or the gallery and just hit update and then it's live on the website. It's flexible. WordPress has been around for a very long time. There are a lot of pre-built plugins and themes to get you started. You can pretty much get started with a custom-built theme right off the gate. If you find that the theme or the plugin doesn't really quite get you what you want to do, you can just write your own. Okay. And why is it better than say Squarespace or Wix or anything like that? Not necessarily that it's better. It's more it's more flexible and customizable. If you start a website, on Wix or Squarespace, right, and you find out that you later want to change it, like I said before, it's pretty hard to change. You're kind of married to the template that you chose. With WordPress, it's pretty similar, but you can get around it a little bit more. And worst come to worst, if your template doesn't work, you can just change, create your own, brand new template, just exactly what you want. And the content is all owned by you. It's not owned by Squarespace. It's not at Wix. You can transfer your WordPress website to another hosting provider. But all your content is the exact same. It's all there. You just put a new theme on it. Okay. So I've been talking a lot, and so now I'm just going to get more into the nuts and bolts, with WordPress. I'm going to show you how to do a WordPress install, how to edit page, how to install plugins, and maybe a little bit of the file directory in the database. Okay. So I have my own hosting provider. This is very typical of what you would see when you create your own you have your own hosting account and use something called cPanel. I'm going to go down here, and usually you can install WordPress manually, but if you use your own hosting provider, they have it already pre-built in for you. So I'm going to click on this WordPress. Okay, I'm going to click on install. I am going to choose to install, let's do this. I'm going to install it in my demo site. I just fill in, I need to give an admin, username. I'm going to do that. For the password, I always recommend choosing a strong password. So you got that. I'm going to remove that. Okay. Say, this is my demo. Okay. You can change up a couple, different settings. You can go into here and play around with the database, settings and stuff. This is a little bit more advanced, but it's primarily used for security features. Okay. I'm not going to select a theme. I'm just going to go ahead and install the default installation. So when you hit install, oh, I've already installed something there apparently. Let me go back. So yeah, I've installed it already. This is what it looks like. Let's go ahead and go in there. And type in my name. This is the account that I created. I'm going to log in. This, oops. Okay, that's embarrassing. I probably did that wrong. Let me do this again. I'm going to use Nextech. Okay. Yep. And now we're going to wait roughly about you're going to see this goes up pretty fast. Okay, this, yeah, took less than a minute. This got installed. I go in there, right? This is the exact same installation I showed you before. Now I'm going to go ahead and log in, hopefully. Oh, yep, I'm logged in. Okay. So this is what is the familiarity of WordPress for a lot of different people. Okay. You have posts, which is where you post your blog info. You have pages where you can edit your pages. And you can add new users to be able to log in. And let's go ahead and let's say I add a new one, right? Let's say I add Erica at yahoo.com, right? And I'm not going to do the whole thing because I don't want to bug anyone who actually owns that email address, but you can set different roles for people to an administrator has full access, and an editor and author will have access to actually update page and posts. You can even install plugins that will allow you to make this pretty granular so that certain people can have only certain permissions and other people's don't. Now, let's say that I go here, okay? I click on this post, okay? Pretty bare bones, okay? Now, I want to, let's say, edit this post, okay? And this is where I would start editing. Hi. I hit update. And now I go view this post. You can see that my change have been, made. It's that easy. Now, let's say I want to change the theme because this theme is kind of boring. Let's say I wanted to go back to 2019. Okay, you can activate this new theme, and then when you hit refresh on this page, this new theme's changed. Your content remains the same, but your theme has now changed. Okay. let's say that you wanted to add like you're not happy with WordPress like default like gallery. Okay, let's go ahead and install a new gallery. Let's search up like what WordPress has for us. Okay, let's install this one. Now you've installed. Let's activate it. Great. Let's go try to add a new gallery. I'm gonna go ahead and I have a couple images here set up already. I'm just gonna open them all up. I was really hoping this button would actually allow me to hit upload, but it doesn't seem to be doing it. Hold on one second, please. Let's try this again. Huh. It doesn't seem to be working, which is unfortunate, and my apologies for that. I don't know why. Sometimes you run into these little glitches. So we're going to skip that for now. And let's go to like, a different website that I've pre-installed already. And this is the exact same website I installed through this like, setting right here, except the only difference is that when I install this, okay, well, let me do it. I selected a different theme when I installed this. So this is a WordPress website that I just quickly installed. It has, it looks much better than the default themes that you would normally like, see. And it took me less than like 5 minutes to install this whole thing. Now, I'm going to log in here as well. Okay, same familiar interface as you saw last time. I'm going to go and visit the site main page. All right, and let's say I want to edit this page because this has like some dummy text here. You hit edit on this page. And unlike the other ones where you just have to edit with this like editor right here, these custom themes or more advanced themes will have something very similar to this where you can just edit like this. And it's basically exactly what you see on the website. So if I go in here and I say, hi, this is a new post. Yep. And then you hit update. Page content update successfully. And then when we go to this page, okay, same thing. We saw that it's been updated. What's nice about this is that you have more advanced like customization feature. You can drag and drop. It's a lot more intuitive than like just editing WordPress like natively, and it's much more familiar to what Squarespace and Wix like provides for you. And the only caveat about this is a premium theme, but you're going to run into the same issues that you're going to run into with a lot of other pre-built like themes. Sometimes you're trying to like change stuff and the theme just doesn't support it. And at that point, you can either choose to go with the theme or you have to create your own custom one. But this is the power of like website builders nowadays. You don't really need a lot to like get started with building a website. You can go ahead and just install a theme that you like and then just change certain things. Let's say you wanted to change this image, for example. You can probably just delete it and then select one like a new one. And then there you go. If I hit update on this again, update successfully, hit refresh, and now you have a new image. Okay. Let's go back for a little bit. if I can find it. Yep. Okay. Show you how to edit pages. I show you oh, the nuts and bolts. That's what I forgot to do. One last thing. Let's see. I think I'll just go ahead and go to do it. Okay, I'm back into my C panel. I'm going to click on this PHP MyAdmin, which is a very popular way to manage SQL database. And you can see here, this is all of the database that I hold for the WordPress installation. And if I click on one of these, for example, and I go to users, you can see this is where my user setting is. It has my user login. The password is hash, right? But pretty much every single change you make in the WordPress is going to be stored in the database, and it keeps a revision history so that you can go back to it. This is the nuts and bolts of what actually drives the entire your website. If I change the settings on this or I delete this, the website will just fail to work. Okay. Now, that's pretty much WordPress, in a nutshell. I ran by it really fast because we're limited on time. Let me double check to see if there's any questions. Could you go back to the WordPress info page the WordPress info page? Which one do you mean, Gavin? And to answer your question, Abby, it is public. If you go to if you type this directly into your web browser, you will see this website live. It's because I created it already. Okay. Oh, someone asked me my career path before Workday. I've been very fortunate enough to work in a variety of different fields. I started as being a Flash developer, working for a startup. After that, I worked for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers down in Florida as a web developer. Then I worked for myself. I worked as a consultant. I started my own business with some friends at some point. That failed. I went to work for a nonprofit scientific organization to work with GPS data. And now I'm currently working at Workday. Gavin, if you could tell me more about what you mean by the WordPress info page, I'll get back to it. For the time being, I'm going to hop on to the next portion of the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about modern front-end development. Modern front-end development, like I said before, is based primarily still on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it's been that way for over 30 years, which is why things continue to work. And the way they've changed over the years is interesting. HTML itself hasn't really changed that much. You still have div tables and stuff like that, but they have proposed new stuff like header, footer, section, right? And the primary reason for this is that so that search engine crawlers like Google can figure out where things actually work. For example, if you have a news article, right, and instead of calling it div, and then Google has to guess what the content in it actually means. If you put it in article block instead, Google will know exactly it's a news article, and they'll be able to index it. The other thing that's really nice is that by adding in accessibility, right, your screen readers will be able to read what's exactly on the screen, knows exactly what to read. So for the people who are blind or have vision issues, the screen reader would be like a lifesaver, actually reading out the text on the screen, letting them know like, what is actually on the web page. But for the most part, aside from semantic HTML, HTML itself hasn't really changed over the years. You can think of HTML as if a website is like a house, then HTML is more like the wood and walls, the skeleton that holds up the website itself, right? And then CSS would be the paint and everything else, the furniture that you put in to decorate the house. Now, I'm going to show you this, so like don't worry about like absorbing all this information really quick. But CSS is primarily used for styling, and CSS has changed, like comparative to HTML. CSS has changed a lot over the years. CSS by itself still works, but most of the time we use like CSS preprocessor like Sass and less, which allows us to basically code CSS in a way that is reusable. We also have naming conventions like BEM for CSS. And you can see it here, I'll highlight it, but oops. If you have like login form __ title, right? It basically lets you know that this title belongs to this login form. Versus if you just have login form or title by itself, they don't necessarily relate. Like, the user will look at it and have no idea like, what it means. And that's just a convention that actually doesn't, you can name it whatever you want, but the convention helps when we adopt it and other developers can take a look at it and kind of know what to expect. You also don't necessarily have to write your entire CSS by yourself. There's a lot of like pre-built libraries like Bootstrap or Material UI, and I'll actually show you it. Basically, Bootstrap will allow you to use like all of these. Okay, you don't have to write it from scratch. If you needed like was it like a drop-down menu, for example, like you can just use Bootstrap. They've styled it, everything for you. You just like plug it in there. And a lot of WordPress themes are probably built on top of WordPress. I'm sorry, a lot of WordPress themes are built on top of Bootstrap. Okay. Let's go back to this one. And then, of course, there's other things like emotion CSS or style components, which just basically allows you to use CSS within JavaScript, like libraries. That gets a little bit like more advanced into building web apps, and you don't normally need to use that for like regular websites. And we come down to probably the biggest difference in modern like front-end development nowadays. It would be JavaScript. And some of you may have heard of these like JavaScript frameworks, React, Vue, and Angular. They are what is kind of almost necessary to give me one second. Oh, they're almost basically what's kind of necessary in order to develop like web apps. JavaScript by itself was released in 1993, wasn't adopted into like 2000, used very heavily by like you pretty much can't avoid JavaScript nowadays. And we currently use it because it's already built into browsers and we don't particularly want to switch. What website do I think is the best out there? I will actually come back to that. That will be part of my conclusion statement. I will let you guys like, know, okay? Wait, Erica, how much longer do I have? Like 5 minutes? Okay. In the interest of time, I think I only have like a few minutes left. I wanted to show you something real quick. But I don't think I have enough time, so I'm just going to show you the final results rather than the I think it's this one. Of course, it's not funny. Give me 1 second. Correct. Okay, we'll go with this one instead. Okay. Aside from WordPress, when you're doing like front-end development, you're going to actually have to touch HTML and CSS a lot. And some of the more common ones you're going to probably see is something that, you have something like this, which is a card of sorts, right? And you want to make it resize. And when you resize it, right, it changes the width and the height, but keeps everything else the same. What you see here, it has nothing to do with JavaScript. It's actually all done through HTML and CSS. So right here, I'm going to close all this out. But you basically have a UL element, which is a list item. Okay. UL, that's the block that holds the list. LI is a list item. And inside that list item, I've created this card object. This card object has an image. It has a content block, and inside the content block, it has a title and a description. Okay. If I delete all this, and there's no CSS, this is what search engine actually sees. They don't see like the styling, they just see this. Okay. It's only after I type in all of the CSS that it will reload into this for you. And I can change pretty much anything like I want with CSS. You see there's a box shadow that I added around here. If I went ahead and like changed some of these settings, for example, now instead of being a shadow, you can actually see this is just like a plain kind of border that I drew around it. Okay. And since I have 1 minute left, I will quickly close off my presentation and answer some of these questions. So someone asked me this question, and of course this image is also not money. Someone asked me a question, which website do I think is the best out there? I'm going to have to show with this one. Now, this may be surprising to some people why this is like, kind of the best website out there, especially with everything I've shown. But the thing that gets most people confused, right, is that they think that as a front-end developer, you're supposed to make things like pretty, which, you are supposed to do, but honestly, you're providing a solution. Like, it's not just about making something pretty, it's about making something usable. And for Warren Buffett and people, old school people just interested in financial information, they're not really caring about something looks pretty. They're caring about the information, and they want to be able to click on it right away to figure out what they need. So this perfectly works just fine. It loads very fast, right? And you got exactly what you need. The best website is built for the audience. There's a famous saying that says art is different, sends a different message to each and every single person who sees it. Good design, on the other hand, is supposed to send the exact same message to whoever sees it. So good design is more or less predictable. That's why you have Apple and Android, and why you see a lot of the same familiar feature and functionality. It's because they know that that's what works. If they try to be creative with it, people will just oftentimes get confused. And I think I will wrap that up. Thank you so much for everyone to come by. I hope you got something from this session. And if you have any other questions, I'll be here for the next few minutes.